Hey everyone, and welcome to another gtaonline in-depth guide here on the channel. You know how in my mansion features guide I said I was still kind of unsure what the workout and yoga boosts did exactly? Well, I did some more investigating and testing, and now I know exactly what each of these buffs do, and in this video I'm going to relay that information to you guys so that you can also be aware of how they work exactly. So on the surface, the yoga boost gives you a 15% movement and swim speed boost, but only if you're maxed out on the stamina stat. If you are maxed out, it will just raise that stamina stat until you get to max, and then you'll get the buff. The workout boost at the gym gives you a 20% damage resistance buff and a 25% melee damage boost. And each buff, the melee/damage resistance and the speed boost, will last 48 minutes or until you switch lobbies. They do not follow you between missions or into heists and stuff. Now that is just a surface level of understanding of these abilities though, because especially with the damage resistance buff, there's a lot of intricacies to it. Lots of ways you can stack it with things like BST and armor that make it act a little bit differently. And so that's where the testing comes into play. So we tested 3 different weapon types, the Carbine Rifle Mark II, the Heavy Sniper Mark II, and the Homing Launcher in various scenarios. The Carbine Rifle Mark II against a character with no buffs at all, no armor, no BST, just a max health character over level 100, kills in 11 shots to the body. If we add BST into the mix, that jumps up to a 21 shot kill to the body, as BST makes you take half the normal damage. Testing the Carbine Rifle Mark II with the damage resistance buff from the gym, the Carbine Rifle Mark II now goes from an 11 shot kill to a 13 shot kill, so a slight increase in survivability. It doesn't start getting really crazy until you combine both the workout buff and BST, because with those two combined, you now take 26 shots to kill, up from 11 with no buffs at all, and up from 21 with just BST. And to achieve maximum damage resistance possible on foot, if you add armor on top of BST, on top of the gym buff, it now takes 31 shots from the Carbine Rifle Mark II to kill you. Although this does seem kind of trivial when you realize that one headshot still will kill you no matter what, but it's still pretty crazy that you can take that many shots to the body to kill. And one really interesting thing to note about armor is that your armor damage scales with your damage resistance, meaning the amount of shots your armor takes to break increases as your damage resistance increases. So you can see right here with no damage resistance on at all, no BST and no buff, his armor breaks in just a couple of shots, but with everything stacked, the armor lasts much longer. Moving on to a more important threat though, the Heavy Sniper Mark II. This thing is known for one-shotting a fully maxed out health player to the chest with no buffs. It's what makes it the best weapon in the entire game next to rocket launchers. As we all know, if you use BST, you can tank Heavy Sniper Mark II bullets. It goes from a 1-shot to a 3-shot against someone using BST. But if you happen to have the mansion strength buff, you actually don't need BST to survive against a player who is not using BST. You can actually tank a shot without using BST as long as you have that mansion buff on. Now, if they are using BST, then it doesn't matter, you're still going to get one-shotted regardless, but if you combine armor, BST, and the mansion buff, it actually lets you survive an extra bullet, and you now die in 4 heavy sniper shots from an unbuffed player, which is kind of insane. That's actually quite a game changer for PvP engagements. However, there is a pretty big catch that we will get into that kind of nullifies this entire thing. So the last thing that I wanted to test when it comes to the damage resistance is rockets. Are you able to tank missiles by stacking as much damage resistance as possible? For those of you who don't know, you can actually survive a self-inflicted homing missile explosion if you have BST and armor on at the same time. It lets you survive with just a little bit of health left. However, for other player rockets, you cannot survive with this same method if you combine both BST and armor. Other player rockets still one-shot you. Well, if you happen to have the mansion buff, you now only need BST to be able to survive the self-inflicted rocket launch. You don't need armor on top of BST. Despite all of this though, even if you stack armor, BST, and the new buff, you cannot survive a homing missile from another player, or another player's vehicle for that matter. They all still one-shot you through all of the buffs, which I think is a huge missed opportunity. It would have been nice to have a way to mitigate rocket damage because explosives are so overpowered and overused in gtaonline today. Being able to, in some way, protect yourself against at least one missile would have been a real game changer. Instead, all they did is make explosive spam even more lucrative by making bullets less effective because that's the only thing that really helps you with this damage mitigation. Although it doesn't really matter at the end of the day because I don't even think this buff is working as intended right now. Because remember how I said the buffs last 48 minutes or until you switch sessions? Well, the damage resistance buff only lasts for 1 life, so if you apply the buff by working out and then die in some way, you now have to do another workout at the mansion to regain that strength buff to regain the damage resistance. Which I don't think should be how it works. That makes the entire thing just pointless if it's only for 1 life. The yoga buff lingers after you die. You still retain that speed boost until you leave the lobby or the 48 minutes has passed. But for whatever reason, the strength one only lasts until you die. It's really stupid. There is another aspect of the strength buff that we need to discuss though, the melee boost. And to test this, we'll be using the golf club. So the golf club normally kills in 3 swings. Well, with the strength buff, it will lower it to just 2 swings to kill. And if you combine both the strength buff and BST, you now have 1-hit swings with any of your melee weapons, which is pretty cool, right? Yeah, the only problem is that you can just get 1-hit melee kills by using the stone hatchet because that one hits anybody it touches no matter how many buffs they have on or how many buffs you have on. So it really just makes the melee buff pointless at the end of the day. Oh, and also the melee boost goes away as well when you die, so you only get it for 1 life. It just doesn't make any sense. Why would one of these buffs last after death and one of them only last for 1 life? Despite the other end conditions being the exact same. That just doesn't make much sense to me. That's what makes me think the strength buff is not working as intended. Because why would you waste your time getting that buff if it only lasts until you die a single time in free mode? I guess you could argue it's somewhat useful for PvE activities because you're not really dying in PvE. I think it's still stupid though. It should just last as long as the other one does. So what I like to see change is, first of all, fix it so that it lingers after death and is a worthwhile buff to apply to yourself. And secondly, make it mitigate explosive damage. Why, when I have in total a 60% resistance to all damage and armor on top of that, which gives me even more health, am I still being one-shotted by homing missiles? Especially those from vehicles. Why are rockets just overpowered as hell in GTA 5? In GTA 4, you could survive a rocket by just being far enough away from it. But in gtaonline, even with all the damage mitigation in the world stacked on top of each other, a rocket barely in the blast radius of you will still just one-shot you from full health. If you have BST with the mansion buff, and especially with armor, a missile should just not kill you from full health. It just should not. At the end of the video here though, I do want to discuss the fastest way to apply these buffs because there are a couple of neat tricks you can do to make them apply faster. For the strength buff, the pull-ups, push-ups, or sit-ups all have basically the same exact completion time, so do those if you want to apply it the fastest. And for the yoga, if you start it up and then just sit there AFK without touching your controller, the game will just kick you off the activity early, and you'll still get the speed boost applied in a fraction of the time. You can see right here I'm already done, and my friend Ender is still doing yoga to get the buff applied, and you finish around a minute earlier than you otherwise would doing the entire process of yoga. Anyways, that is pretty much going to wrap it up for this video. Huge shout out to Text Funds 2 for letting me know what the exact amounts are for the damage resistances and speed boosts, as well as to my friend EnderCrafter for helping me record and test for this video. Unfortunately, the only one really worth applying right now is the yoga speed boost until Rockstar decides to fix the other one. If you guys enjoyed the video or found it helpful, feel free to leave a like as well as subscribe to my channel for more gtaonline content. I also want to give a huge shout out to all of my channel members for your support. If you'd like to become a member for some exclusive perks, you can either use the join button or the link that's down in the description. And as always, thanks for watching and have a great day.